Hello everybody and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. I have a very important breakdown mapping out the short-term price of Bitcoin, talking about why we need to hold this range low that we're at right now if we're going to end up seeing continuation in the bullish sense, or what happens if we end up breaking from this range and where does the price go from there. We're going to map out Bitcoin so that you guys know and are best prepared moving forward for whichever scenario takes place. And then we're also going to be jumping into the Richard Heart ecosystems, mapping out the best ones inside of this market. We've been nailing a lot of these. Some of them have provided some of the bigger gains in our portfolio over the last couple weeks, and I think that there's even more upside potential coming very soon. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and with that being said, let's jump right into this amazing video today. Alrighty guys, here we are to start off today's video mapping out Bitcoin, and I think that now is a perfect opportunity to touch up on some of that same analysis that we've had. If you guys remember, we were covering this range for, a long time at this point. We were more or less mapping out this support zone, and this was what we were mapping out before we even had the ETF. We were pretty much just watching this range high and this range low. This range high, we had a couple failed attempts at a breakout that took place here. Once the ETF got approved, we eventually did break out. But then we can see we instantly sold back within the same range. So once again, guys, we have hit this range a few different times as support, and when we have touched it, it has bounced, and we have seen the market reverse. Bitcoin has had this massive sell-off after this rejection. We're all the way back down at this range. Don't be surprised if this produced some type of short-term bounce to the upside. I'm not saying it's going to break out because I really don't know if it will, but we're back inside of the same range. So really we're just going to be watching more or less this mid-range, which would be the top of this lower high at 43,150, or we're going to be watching the range high at 44,328, upwards of 44,728. Our support low is 40,200. If we lose that, I think that this thing is going to end up reversing in a bearish sort of sense, and we're probably going to end up revisiting all the way back down to the midpoint of this consolidation, being like $35,000. So if we lose the support or this range, expect a deeper pullback to follow. However, in the shorter time frames, we are technically holding it. So as long as we do hold this range, we got to expect that we could see, some type of short-term bounce to the upside. However, any breakdown where this rejects and then that becomes resistance, we're going to expect a decent sized breakdown from this. So just be aware of that, considering on a weekly time frame, if we remove our drawing tools and zoom out, ever since we broke above 25K all the way back at the beginning of 2023, pretty much, it was pretty much the spring of that year, I told you guys our target's $48,500. It's the most obvious area of resistance based off of horizontal support and resistance, but then also it's the 618 fib, which is the golden pocket, which is the most important area of support or resistance inside of a chart as we see it trending. If in a bull market, you'll see it top or bottom at that level. Oftentimes it'll bottom in the same way that we ended up topping right there. So we perfectly tagged that $48,500 target. We tagged the top of that lower high, and we've seen this pullback. So don't be surprised if we did end up coming back down to revisit this main trend line that we've been working on since the beginning of the cycle, considering that would be pretty customary of all of our prior cycles. We do have a pretty ugly rejection candle up here. We can't say that it's 100% reversed until we break down from this current support that we're at. Once we lose $40,200, that's where we're going to be looking to target a lower low all the way back down to this trend line. I don't think that we're going to tag the tops of these highs, but like I said, guys, stopping somewhere in between this last consolidation around $34,000, $35,000, that wouldn't be that crazy. We could see something along the lines of this, and then that is where we ultimately build that new foundation before new all-time highs. We got a Bitcoin halving less than 100 days away. There's a lot of good things to look forward to, and if we do get this type of a correction, it's just a better opportunity to get into the market at a cheaper price, considering we all know where this thing is headed long term. Alrighty guys, now I wanted to cover Hex, I wanted to cover PulseChain, I wanted to cover PulseX, and all of the other tokens inside of the Richard Heart ecosystem, because we have been absolutely nailing a lot of these calls, and I need to update you guys on what is actually playing out. Now, as it stands, we're going to dive into the shorter time frames and look at Hex. We're going to talk a little bit about the reason I was bullish on it, what I was watching for. This is the Ethereum version. This is the first one in the whole ecosystem, right? Now, when we're looking at this, I saw a pretty obvious inverse head and shoulder formation that was playing out. And as it stands, we were unable to break out of the neckline, right? Because we needed to get above this neckline right here to cement the reversal. We were unable to get above that, and we are pulling back in the short term. When I'm looking at this market, I want you guys to be aware that it does look like it wants lower. It looks like it wants to come back down to this mid-range, which would be 0.0067. So don't be surprised if in the short term we do see a little bit of an ABC correction. It's not going to be changing the big picture setup. This is still an inverse head and shoulder. It's just that we're going to end up seeing a short-term correction in here before we can finally break above. But same rules apply. Once we get above this neckline, it's a reversal of our entire bear trend, right? If we come out to a log scale, and we zoom out here and we take a look at what is actually developing, we had this main sort of descending resistance, and I'm going to draw it like this. We had this descending resistance going all the way into our bear market. The thing about Hex is it had two bear markets, right? The whole market bottomed at the end of the year 2023, or most of them did. Hex made this big breakout. It actually outperformed a lot of the different cryptos in that market cycle. However, once PulseChain went live, they duplicated Hex, right? And that's where we get this P-Hex version. So they duplicated it inside of the hard fork. So when that happened, everybody that was holding E-Hex on the Ethereum version got the same amount of P-Hex over here on PulseChain. And so people added liquidity, they started trading this, and now there's two versions of Hex. Because of that, we saw another 96% correction that followed, considering it was duplicated by twice as much. And I think that a lot of people have written off eHex, but here's the thing, guys. Once we actually come back down, we retest this mid-range at 0.066 approximately. Once we get above this neckline, I do believe that we're going to be making another run back up to this descending resistance, the main one that we've been in this entire bear cycle. And from where we're going to be looking at the mid-range being 0.066 approximately, all the way to the top of that, you're looking at almost a 4x move. So I do believe that this one is still going to be providing some of the bigger gains. It's just that we kind of have to get outside of this resistance, and we're just working on the breakout right now. Now, if we come over here and look at P-Hex, I want you guys to be aware that this one actually looks a little bit better. When we're comparing the two, P-Hex has already broken descending resistance. We finished our first cycle with this ABC correction back down. We ended up breaking out from descending resistance right here, and then we ended up making another corrective move and another new descending resistance. But then I made my video about it. We ended up selling off a little bit more from that, but that was when we ended up getting that breakout. Now, as it stands, we saw a pullback, and I expected to see a pullback. However, we're still sitting on top of those range highs. So as it stands, this looks more bullish. This is actually sitting on top of its range highs as support, whereas this is sitting below, obviously was below, and is selling off and is actually showing more weakness. So I really thought that the Ethereum version would do better, and I'm a little bit surprised to see that this is actually holding up much better in the comparison of the two. However, we got to expect to see that this is still a long-term game, and they're both going to kind of rally amongst each other, and there's probably going to be periods where one of them outperforms the other. So it's a long-term cycle, but when we see such great volume like what we have all in here, you know, very consistent, new volume, consistent breakouts. Now we're retesting the prior high as new support. Don't be surprised if this thing ends up running, you know, for another new impulse, assuming Bitcoin bounces. Because if Bitcoin bounces in here, you know, overall we would expect altcoins to do their thing. But if Bitcoin makes a lower low, overall I do think that these are all going to end up correcting from that point. If we see Bitcoin correct, P-Hex would basically be doing something like this. This would be a wave A, we're inside of wave B, and we'd be making a lower low like this. That's kind of what I would anticipate. However, if Bitcoin bottoms, don't be surprised if a lot of these altcoins make a new high, especially ones like these that have been outperforming the rest of the market. Now, coming over here and looking at PulseX, you guys really need to follow me on Twitter, considering we talked a lot about this. Well, I actually made some updates last night. In my video where I first covered all of these, we were just at the point of us getting a big breakout. We ended up coming back down and retesting this trend line one more time right here before this breakout, but we ended up following pretty much perfectly to what I had in my analysis. We all made this big breakout, and then last night I made an update and said that I do think that this is the local top. So you guys do need to follow me on Twitter, considering I can't always make the quickest updates just on YouTube. I have to wait for the next day. And so if you want to see what I'm actually talking about in the moment of some of this, make sure you follow me on Twitter, because I did anticipate a sell-off taking place, and that's exactly what ended up happening. Now, when we're looking at the Elliott waves, because of the dip, how quickly this was bought up, we got to understand that this can be drawn a couple different ways. This is either a wave 1 and we just finished wave 3 and we're actually in the middle of wave 4 before we still have another move coming. Do not be surprised if this is it, considering when we're looking at P-Hex and we're looking at this having such a big buyback on this dip, if Bitcoin bounces in this consolidation, we're going to see altcoins end up running again, in my opinion. So as we're seeing all of these actually retesting prior highs as new support, And PulseX itself had such a big buyback on this dip. All PulseX did was basically come back down and retest our wave B, right? Our wave A and B. Because all this was in the first cycle of our bear market was a wave A, a wave B, and then a wave C. So oftentimes when a market starts breaking out, once they retest this B wave as new support, this is where the majority of the reversal sets in. So when I'm looking at this, I know that we've already finished a one wave impulse. That was right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got our ABC correction shortly after, A, B, and C. And then we made a new 1, 2. But now where the question becomes, was this a 3, 4, and a 5 before we start selling off? Or is this a 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're still waiting on one more final move? Do not be surprised if this is it. I wanted to make this video because of the fact Elliott waves aren't the most perfect tool to use. And the best thing that you can do, if you followed my video and bought all of this stuff down in here, hold it the whole cycle. Don't try and get in and out based off of the short-term corrections. I might come on and talk about them, and I might update you guys on Twitter about them and on YouTube about corrections, and I might be bearish in the short term, but I don't think that anybody should ever use that as a reason to go out and sell or think that you're somehow a magical trader because I said something and now you're going to go follow what I say. The best thing that you can do, and the biggest mistakes that I made in the last cycle, we're just like thinking too much in the short term and being like, oh man, you know, I'm up all this profit. I've been down for so long. We've seen this a nasty sell-off, the lawsuit and all of this crap. And then you go out and just start, you know, taking heavy profit before we're even into a new all-time high. I don't want this video to be encouraged of that. I want you guys to be aware of the long term more. And what I'm trying to explain is with this amount of volume and with this strong of a buyback that we just saw, don't be surprised if some of these end up making another high. And if that's the case and Bitcoin bounces, a lot of these certain altcoins are going to run again. And don't be surprised and it's the ones that have been outperforming the rest of the market that are going to end up leading. And so far, these have actually done a lot of that. So as we're seeing this buyback, if we do end up seeing one more wave 5 in here, just understand that the best thing that we can look to do for the long term and for the sake of our portfolios is just to be capitalizing on the long term. Now comes the point where we really want to be holding the majority of our portfolio through the whole cycle. Now next up is going to be Pulse. Now when we're looking at Pulse, this is another one that followed PulseX. We pretty much hit all of my targets perfectly inside of this move. PulseX extended a little bit higher considering when we're comparing the two. I didn't think that we'd tag all the way up at the 3618. I kind of thought that we would stop either in between the 2618 and the 1618 or at the 2618, but we ended up extending up here quite a bit higher, which is why the best thing that we can do is look to hold, because as these are outperforming, they're blowing out all of our price targets. People that took profits at the 1618 or the 2618 are now looking at this as it's retested both of those levels and looking even more bullish, and now they're thinking, oh no, what am I going to do? So all of these are going to end up following each other to some extent. They're both retesting the tops of their wave B, and so the question now comes are we going to end up holding this level? Or are we going to end up, you know, this being some type of wave A, wave B, and C? I wouldn't be surprised. It wouldn't go that low, but it would come back down a little bit lower. Don't be surprised if that's the case. That would mean Bitcoin makes a lower low and has a bigger sell-off. But if all of these end up breaking out and making one more high, I think it all rides around Bitcoin holding support in the short term. As this is currently sitting on top of this wave B, the most likely scenario is playing the initial breakout. What I kind of thought the Elliott wave count was this 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and we're about to start topping, or well, technically I already said last night that I expected this to be the local top and we top, and that's exactly what happened right here. However, as we've seen this sell-off, the question now becomes, is the sell-off over? Was this the sell-off? Is that the ending of it before we end up seeing continuation? Or was this just the first leg before we end up making one more kind of lower low before that next move? Regardless of the scenario in the short term, what we're looking at here was a wave 1, a wave 3, we'll get a wave 4. That'll be either what this correction has already done or whether we get one more low to complete that. It doesn't really matter. Both of these scenarios show that we still have one more final impulse to come after this. So that's my big thing that I want you guys to remember is when we're counting corrections in here and we're counting Elliott waves, you're better off focusing on the long term, especially inside of a wave 3, because both of these still show that we have one more impulse to come. Even if we ended up making, you know, a shorter correction back down in here like this before that move actually happens, they're both showing what is going to end up taking place is still one more final high. So that's why I say, Don't get too shaken up by the short term. Focus on the long term. We just flipped the most important level on the chart. Don't get too shaken out already. I mean, like, this is still a long-term thing that we need to be playing here. Now, next up is going to be loan or liquid loans. This one is going to be the lending protocol built on PulseChain. Really good looking setup. Now, we have a lot of new volume that just came in here on this most recent dip. At the time, it was kind of looking like it was a little bit more bearish, but as we've seen this big bullish breakout volume, it does show that we could be at a point of reversing right now. Now, as it stands, when we're looking at this, I made my video talking about this right at this support level, and we ended up making this final sort of lower low right here before the breakout. But I was hoping we might end up coming back down and retesting this level again. But it's looking like with this dip and with this buy action that we just saw, we might end up reversing here before going into a new all-time high. Big picture, this is a really bullish looking setup. Even if we ended up correcting for a lower low, that would just be a more obvious setup to buy. But I don't know if we're going to get that lucky. To me, that's just like the most ideal buy opportunity in the whole world, where I just don't know if we're going to get that lucky to get it. I would honestly be more surprised of us fully retracing, consolidating back on that perfect support level again, just in time for everybody to accumulate before new all-time highs. I find it more likely that majority of the pain is going to be experienced if this thing just starts taking off from here and actually leaves people behind. So when I'm looking at this, all it's really done was this very massive overextended wave 5, but now we've kind of looked like we've maybe completed an ABC correction. We could see one more lower low. We're not 100% sure yet, but this is a very encouraging sign with this amount of buy volume stepping in here on this wick. To me, it says that we're most likely going to reverse off this level. So if that's the case, you know, at $100 million market cap on the lending protocol of PulseChain, a lot of people are going to be using this. So like, you got to invest into the most important infrastructure first if you're going to be holding any of this stuff. And that's why I've kind of started in order. Like, maybe not so much in order. Like, I think that there's still other good tokens and stuff, but if we're looking at what's the most important, like Hex, PHEX, PulseX, PulseChain, and then liquid loans, like, to me, those are like some of the more big focal points inside of the market. And with us actually showing a lot of reversing volume, don't be surprised if this thing's about to send it into a new all-time high very soon. Now, next up is going to be Ink. This one, I wanted to buy into a dip, and it's just not looking like I'm getting any sort of a dip that's going to last. This was the dip, I think. And as it stands, with the whole ecosystem looking this bullish, look at how much volume there is in this. We haven't even hit a new all-time high, and we've seen more volume than even what we saw at the prior cycle. And it's a 25x to that prior cycle top. This is one where you almost want to just FOMO buy into it if you're going to get a position, considering how bullish this thing is. It could have a really massive extended wave 5 in here. And if that's the case, you know, we might still not ever end up buying it at this price again. I don't know. I'm not even trying to encourage you guys to FOMO buy. I'm just saying that this is one of the most bullish setups in the entire ecosystem, so it's impossible to predict. When we're this early and you're seeing this much volume, I don't even think it's a bad idea to FOMO buy into some of this stuff. I don't think it's a bad idea considering look how much volume is in here. That's reversal volume, and we're not even close to the prior all-time highs yet. So to me, buying a local top this early into the cycle isn't the worst thing in the world, considering sometimes buying what you think may be a local top could still just be life-changing wealth. And you got to be, you know, it's hard to buy stuff like this. When it starts breaking out and you feel like you've already been priced out, you feel like it's going to just crash the second you buy it, or you feel like you've already missed out, you know, whatever those emotions are. It's the hardest time for me to want to buy something like this, but there has been a lot of times where I've refused to do that, and it's ended up giving me, you know, some of the bigger gains, or what could have given me some of the bigger gains in my portfolio. So when I'm looking at Ink, I just think it's a really, really bullish setup. And even though we've retested this resistance and we did have this pullback, I wouldn't be surprised if this was actually our wave 3. We just saw wave 4. And we're about to get another wave 5 here. And the problem with this is because of how impulsive it's got right here, this wave 5 could be overextended. It could come all the way to the top of this lower high being $8.45 before it actually starts topping. And if that's the case, I would expect something like this. You know, we might come all the way back down to pretty much the same level that we're at. I wouldn't, you know, it could go lower than that. It could come all the way back down and retest this prior high. But with this amount of volume coming in here, to me, that's a little bit more of a bullish sign than it is, you know, fully retrace, come all the way back, wreck everybody. I think that the dips are going to get bought up in the same way that they did right here. So if we do see one more push right here, you know, to the top of this next high is like 1.4, 1.5x. So still good gains. I don't know if I'm going to get myself to buy this just because I have such a hard time FOMO buying into stuff. It's just a rule of mine. But people that do, I don't necessarily even think it's a bad thing. So like, I just be aware. I don't know what I'm talking about right here. I just think that this one is one of the more bullish setups, and I'm just being open and honest about that. So whatever you guys decide to do, it's your own thing, but do not fade this one. I'm really excited about it. And if we do get this type of a correction one way or another, even if it has to come after we hit $8 plus, I'm buying that dip. I just think it could be a really good setup to hold long term with all this volume. Now next up is going to be Fame. This one is going to be the GMX hard fork. So if you're looking to leverage trade any of these tokens, you know, you got to go and do it over here. I'm 100% going to be doing so because I think that there's so much upside. You know, when we're looking at this, we had 2 rejections right here. But, you know, we could still end up holding support. It's not like we have to reject just because we've had these 2 moves. Sometimes this is what happens before we get a breakout. But if we do reject in here and we do make a sell-off, I just expect us to come back down to this mid-range, maybe like 50 cents approximately, before we do end up getting that next move into new all-time highs. Big picture, this is going to be one of the more bullish charts. Big picture, this is going to be one of the more bullish setups you can buy. I think it's super undervalued versus where it will be long term. And I'm going to throw this one in there as one of the more vital parts of the infrastructure of PulseChain. All of these are pretty much in order. You could maybe put Fame above some of these other ones, considering how important it is to actually be able to trade some of these assets. I just mainly put it lower because it has lesser market cap. So it left it towards the end for the people that actually cared enough to wait and watch the video this long. This is one of my absolute favorite projects inside of the ecosystem, and I do think that we're going to be going into a new all-time high relatively soon, even if we end up seeing one more pullback before that takes place. Now next up is going to be Teddy Bear. This is the top meme coin of PulseChain, one of my favorites. I'm up about a couple X so far. What this does look like is that we could have either finished 5 waves up like this, or we could have just finished a 1, 2, 3, well, it'd be like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're about to get one more wave 5. I don't know 100%. If we do see a lower low, I wouldn't be surprised to revisit the bottom of this range right in over in this area, 0.088 and 8353. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys that want me to actually name prices. Some of these things are just so hard to even read to you guys that's why I don't actually tell you the prices. But this one is one I do think is going to be one of the very best. But if you're looking for the meme coin at $13.2 million total market cap, it's one of my favorite projects. I think it's going to do really well. I'm already up. I just plan to hold what I bought long term and just see how much it can grow as the whole PulseChain ecosystem moves. So if you're looking for a meme coin, looking for something that's got, you know, a high potential of a lot of profit, look no further than this. We're in a correction. If the market bottoms, I think that this will probably end up bottoming too. So just be aware of that. Now last up on today's video is going to be Axis token. This one is going to be created by one of the biggest people inside of the community, being Axis Alive. Now when we're looking at this, it's got, you know, basically store of value written all over it. It's a long-term project. If you're looking to hold this, you want to just hold it the whole cycle. But be warned, I do think you should take profits if you're going to hold it the whole cycle, as with all of this stuff. I do think it's a good opportunity to get into these projects and look to just capitalize on the whole picture, the big picture trend. But at the same time, like, you do want to make sure you're taking profits long-term as well. Now when we're seeing this, it's got great Elliott waves. That's kind of why I like to look at this token. It just seems like a really solid setup. It's got 5 waves up. We finished an ABC correction back down, and now we've broken out and made a new all-time high. So as it stands, this looks really solid. It actually had its dip get bought up really quickly, so it does look like it wants more upside in the short term. I wouldn't be surprised to see this thing come up to like $30,000. What we're looking at here is if this was a wave 1, this is a wave 3. So to see it performing more vertical, I mean, that's what you would expect inside of a wave 3. It's a little bit hard to draw Elliott waves with some of these, considering if you go to a log scale, it looks like this. So, I mean, it's almost impossible to really be able to say. But I do think that this one is going to be pretty much the best store of value if you're looking for something that just has probably not a lot of sell side pressure at all, considering it's got a teeny tiny supply. There's almost like no tokens, which is why they're worth, you know, 20K per token. So it's probably going to be worth more than Bitcoin long term because of that. I would imagine that people end up, you know, using it as somewhat of a store of value. So with it having good volume and great Elliott waves, that's what I like to look for. And I do think that with his pull inside of the community, this will probably be a project that does end up sticking around. You know, overall the market cap is kind of obsolete. Yes, it's worth 20 billion, but you know, that really doesn't mean a whole lot when we're looking at this. I think that this thing's just going to absolutely continue to go up, and people are going to look at the market cap and scratch their heads because they won't understand how it's possible. It just has a tiny supply. Of course, the market cap's going to be really high. So guys, thank you so much for tuning into this video. If you found value in this, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell. Don't miss out on any of these videos. If you guys want to end up seeing how I'm positioning myself, all of these different altcoins we've been covering for a long time. If you guys ever want to see other ecosystems I'm covering, altcoins I've been accumulating in some of these other projects, everything I post inside of the Discord server, it's a private group. If you guys want to ever get access to that and actually see how I'm positioning myself long term, you can sign up, linked in the description below on my website. On my website, you're going to be able to get lifetime access to my Discord server, and that's really where I'm going to be able to post all of the different picks, even when I take profits on crypto and move into the stocks, commodities, uranium, oil markets, gold, silver, junior miners, those things like that. There's so many opportunities outside of crypto, and it's just that I'm focused on crypto now because I think it's got the biggest opportunity. But when we're taking profits on this stuff and rotating in other markets, that's how we sustain ourselves long term. And I can't even begin to explain how bullish some of these other cycles are outside of crypto, and I'm looking forward to being able to position myself into some of these long term. So if you guys want to follow along, see how I'm going to be doing it long term, links are in the description. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and with that being said, I'll catch you in the next one. As always, peace out.